Hey everyone, it's Kristen from k.becca, and in this video I'll show you how to turn a regular uncolored cut file into a full color print and cut image. I've touched on this in some of the earlier videos in the series with simple shapes that only need to be filled with a single color to be made into print and cut images. But today I'll be working with a more complex file that will need to be reassembled, since these are often the types of cut files that we'll want to make into print and cut images. First, let's grab one of the custom color palettes that we made in the last video in the series so we can use it to color our cut file. I have my custom color palette file open here, and I really like this bright and colorful palette for the image that we'll be working with. So I'll click and drag to select all of the swatch circles in the row, and then I'll press Controller Command plus G on my keyboard to group them together. Next, I'll copy the palette by pressing Controller Command plus C, and I'll click on the top left menu, the very far left icon, to open a new file. Finally, I'll paste the color palette into the file by pressing Controller Command plus V. I'll just drag it over to the side and off of the artboard here so it's not in the way while we're working. I'll click over to the file with the cut file that we'll be working with, and this is the Little Town Snow Globe cut file that you can find in my shop. I'll have a link to it in the description area below. The original file is in several pieces, and cut files can be laid out in a number of different ways. Some files, like this one, have the pieces separated without color fills. Other files have pieces separated with color fills, and still others have the pieces colored and grouped. It all comes down to the preference of the designer who made the file, and also sometimes to the specifications for the different platforms where cut files are sold. The first thing that I'll do is select the grouped file. Go up to the Object menu at the top of the screen and click Ungroup to ungroup the file into separate pieces. This file was originally designed to be a shaker gift tag, so I won't need all of the pieces in the original file for the print and cut file. I'll just select the pieces that I'll need. So first I'll click the background piece to select it, and then I'll press Shift on my keyboard and click to select the other pieces, which are the piece on the left with the houses and the smoke coming out of the chimney. I'll click and drag while pressing Select to select the 3 houses, and finally I'll continue pressing Shift and click on the bottom Happy Holidays piece here, which is actually already set up as a print and cut element. Once we have all of the pieces selected, press Controller Command plus C to copy them, then click back over to the file where we pasted the color palette earlier and paste the pieces into the file by pressing Controller Command plus V. The next thing we're going to do is turn on registration marks for the page. So if your page setup panel isn't open, open that by going over to the far right menu and clicking the top icon, the one that looks like a little piece of paper. Next, click the Registration Marks tab in the panel and select the type of registration marks you need for your machine from the Style drop-down menu. Alright, now we're ready to color and reassemble the file. I'll be using the dropper tool from the left menu to color some of the pieces in the image. And you can see that this tool only becomes active on the menu when you've selected an element that has characteristics like a color fill, border, or pattern fill. The dropper tool is only available in the premium versions of Silhouette Studio, like the Designer Edition, which is what I have. But if you have the free basic version, you can still use custom color palettes to color elements, and I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. First, I'm going to color my houses. The windows and doors in the houses are currently grouped with the houses themselves, so I'll go up to the top menu and click Object, then Ungroup to ungroup them. When I do this, you'll see little boxes appear around all of the different elements in the houses. I want to mention here that this won't always be the case. If these shapes had been subtracted from the main shape in the software that they were originally designed in, like Adobe Illustrator, then each house would be a single piece and wouldn't need to be ungrouped. But in this case, the separate pieces are just grouped together, so we'll ungroup them, so we'll just be filling the house base with color in the next step. I'll select the house on the left, and then I'll go over and click on the dropper tool on the far left menu. Next, I'll click the bright aqua swatch circle from the custom color palette to make the house that color. When I do this, the house will take on the characteristics of the swatch circle, so it won't have a border and it won't be set to cut. It'll just have the color fill. Next, we'll color the middle house in the same way, using the dropper tool to select the bright red color from our color palette. For the last house, I'll show you how to set the fill color if you have the free basic edition of Silhouette Studio. First, I'll click to select the color palette. Then I'll go up to the top menu and click Object, then Ungroup to ungroup the swatch circles in the palette. Next, I'll select just the green swatch circle since this is the color that I want the last house to be. While it's selected, I'll go over to the far right menu and click on the icon that looks like a little artist's palette to open the fill panel. And I'll click on Advanced Options to open up that area. You can see that all of the color values are set for the green color that we've selected. I'll click to select the house, and while it's selected, I'll click into the hex value area over in the fill panel. That's the input area with the pound sign beside it. I'll just click at the end of the value and hit enter on my keyboard to set the house to that color. So this is how you can color the pieces if you have the basic edition of Silhouette Studio. Next, I'll click and drag on each individual house and its different pieces to select them, and then I'll press Ctrl or Command plus G to group them together so I can drag each house around as a single piece. The next piece that I want to color is the base piece. Remember that this cut file has elements grouped as opposed to subtracted from each other, so I'll ungroup this piece so the hole for the tag and the base are separate pieces. I want to fill the base with a pattern as opposed to a solid color, so while I have the fill panel open, I'll click the little polka dot icon tab to open the pattern fill window, and while the base piece is selected, I'll click the pattern that I want to fill it with, which is a subtle textured pattern that looks like a wintry sky. I want the pattern scale to be larger than it came in as, so I'll go down to the scale pattern area and increase the scale to where I want it. Sometimes you need to be careful when you scale patterns up because they could print out blurry, but in this case I know it's a high resolution file and that the scale of the original pattern file was around this size as opposed to the smaller size that it was when I clicked to fill the shape with it. Plus it's a more subtle texture, so even if it's a little blurry, it shouldn't be too noticeable. When I fill the base piece, you may have noticed that the cut hole on the tag disappeared. This is because it's hiding behind the base piece. So while the base is still selected, I'll go up to the top menu and click to open the object menu. Then I'll click Arrange from the drop-down and choose Send to Back of Layer. After I do this, the cut hole will reappear because it's now in front of the base piece. I'll click and drag to select the cut hole and the base, and then I'll press Ctrl or Command plus G to group them together. Now let's take care of some cut line issues before we continue. For the final print and cut file, we only want the border around the tag base plus the cut hole for the tag to be cut, but some of the other pieces are still set to cut. Let's click the Send tab up on the top right menu to see what's what. Okay, so we can see that the piece with the attached houses and smoke coming out of the chimney is set to cut, as is the house that we color using the fill panel as opposed to the color dropper tool. With the color dropper tool, the swatch circles weren't set to cut, so the houses that we filled with color using the dropper aren't set to cut either. But for the house where we used the fill panel, we just changed the fill, not the border line style or properties, which is why it's still set to cut. I'll make sure that all of the pieces that I want to set to no cut are selected, and then I'll go over to the Send panel and click No Cut to make sure that they don't cut. Then I'll click the Design tab from the top right menu so we can continue coloring and assembling our file. I'll click to select the piece with the attached houses, and then I'll open the Fill panel again and choose White from the default swatches to fill this piece with white. Next, I want to remove the red line around the image, so I'll open the Line Style panel and click the Transparent swatch to set the line to no color. When I drag the piece up over the base, you can see that it's white. I'll click and drag to select both the base and the piece with the houses. Then I'll go over to the far right menu and open the Transform panel. The Transform panel's Align options are a huge help when you're reassembling any cut file in Silhouette Studio. First, I'll click to center align the two pieces horizontally, and then I'll align them vertically at the bottom, so the bottom of the piece with the houses is now right at the bottom and perfectly aligned with the tag base piece. Next, I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see better, and then I'll click and drag the first house up over the white area with the houses. I don't want to line the colored house up perfectly on top. Instead, I'll offset it a little bit so some of that white shows through to brighten things up and to give that area a little bit of interest and dimension. I'll repeat this with the next house, and then again for the last house. You'll notice that the last house still has a red border around it, and we don't want that, so I'll select the house, then go over to the far right menu and open the Line Style window, and click on the right tab, the one with the colored lines, and I'll click the Transparent swatch to get rid of that line. One last little adjustment that I want to make here is to move the smoke that's coming out of the chimney over the chimney of the red house. So I'll click to select the piece with the white houses and I'll ungroup that. Then I'll click to select the smoke and use the right arrow on my keyboard to nudge it over to the right until it's pretty well centered over the chimney of the red house. Now we want to work with the Happy Holidays piece, which is actually already set to print and cut, but I don't want to use it in its current layout. I just need the Happy Holidays sentiment, so I'll click to select the piece and then ungroup it. Next, I'll click on just the Happy Holidays text, and I'll drag it up into the tag. I've already grouped all of the elements in the tag together, so they won't move around in the next step. So now I'll click and drag to select the tag and the Happy Holidays text, and I'll go over to the far right menu and click to open the Transform panel. Click to center align the elements horizontally, and now the Happy Holidays is perfectly centered on the tag. We don't need the other elements in the piece where the Happy Holidays originally was, so I'll delete those out. And the last thing that I want to do is to personalize the tag, so I'll click on the far right menu to open the text style panel, and I'll choose a font. I chose the Arvo font and sized it down to 18 points so my custom text will fit on the tag. I'll click the Type tool from the far left menu and start typing on the tag. You could put your name or the names of everyone in your family here, or you could just put to and from and write in your name after the tag is printed and cut. It's totally up to you. After I'm done typing, I'll click and drag to highlight all of the text, and then I'll go over to the far right menu and open the Line Style panel. I'll click the transparent swatch to get rid of the red cut lines around the letters, and then I'll go over to the far left menu, click on the Dropper tool, then click on the bright red color in the custom color palette to make the text red. Next, I'll click and drag on the artboard to select everything, and I'll open the Transform panel again and click the button to center align everything horizontally. After that, I'll nudge the tag using the arrow keys on my keyboard until I'm happy with where my custom text is vertically on the tag. I actually wasn't super happy with the default spacing on the text, so now I'll double click into the text box and click and drag to highlight the text. Then I'll reopen the text style panel from the far right menu and go down to the character spacing area and increase that to 120. I also sized the text down to 16 points so it will still fit on the tag with the new spacing. Finally, I'll click and drag to select everything, and I'll click Controller Command plus G to group it all together. Before I lay the tags out to print, I want to scale the tag down just a little bit, so I'll open the Transform panel, then click on the diagonal arrow to open the Scale window, and under the Specify Dimensions area, I'll click the little lock icon to lock it, and then I'll change the width to 3.5 inches and click the Apply button to scale the tag down. I won't quite be able to fit two of the tags side by side on the page in their original orientation, so while the tag is selected, I'll open the Object menu from the top menu, click Rotate from the drop-down, then click Rotate 90 degrees clockwise to turn the tag on its side. Press Controller Command plus C, then Controller Command plus V to copy and paste the tag, and click and drag the copy right beside the original tag. Repeat the process until the page is full. In this case, we can fit 4 tags per page. Now I want to be sure to save my file so I can use it as many times as I'd like to in the future. Then I'll print the page and cut it with my Silhouette Cameo. These tags print and cut perfectly, and now I have custom tags for my gifts, or I could even leave them out for Santa with milk and cookies on Christmas Eve in case he needs a few extra tags for his gifts. I know I always need a few extra tags for my gifts. In the next video in the series, I'll show you a step-by-step walkthrough of the actual process of printing and cutting, and I'll also give you some tips and fixes for dealing with several common issues that can arise when you're printing and cutting. I hope that you found this video to be helpful, and if you did, it would be great if you would give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll tune in again soon.